Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 230 of the Book Cougars, two middle-aged women on the hunt for a good read. I'm Emily.
And I'm Chris. And I'm so excited to be sitting across the table from Emily once again.
Oh my gosh, it is so nice. I have returned from Colorado, where I was on Grammy duty with grandchild number 2 in an 8-month period. It's an embarrassment of riches.
It's amazing.
It was a really good time. I had trouble getting there and returning in an airplane kind of way. My luggage still hasn't made it home, but here I am, and I am so excited to be across the table from Chris again to talk about one of our favorite things, if not our favorite thing.
Books.
Don't tell our partners.
Well, before we jump into everything, we wanted to thank Nancy for increasing her patronage over on Patreon.
We really appreciate it, Nancy. Thank you so much.
And thanks to Peg. Welcome, Peg. She is our newest Patreon member.
We are so glad to have you as part of our community.
And another thanks to Adele, who sent us a very, we think, interesting article. We haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it's about female ghosts. It's from Atlas Obscura. Why Are There So Many Female Ghosts is the title. And we'll put a link in the show notes, and we'll discuss this next episode.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adele, for thinking about us. And what a compelling idea. I'm curious.
Yeah, I am too. That's interesting because I think in some of the short stories we've read, the creature has been genderless or they've been really gendered. Like that last one we read, what was it? It was a 14-year-old boy ghost.
Well, I was going to say, it seems like children to me.
A lot of children.
The short story we're going to talk about today, like children's footprints again appear.
Yeah, these are Victorian stories. We've started off reading the short stories anyway. And I wonder if child mortality was higher then. Kind of interesting to think about. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that article. So thanks again, Adele, for that.
Yeah, and again, it'll be in the show notes for you. And also, it's another 10th episode, which means we have a giveaway. And we are just going to cut to the chase and give away one book, The Good House by Tananarive Due, who is the author of our second quarter read-along.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's coming up June 8th. We just got these hot copies from the publisher. Thank you to
Washington Square Press
for sending them to us. It's kind of a big book.
It is. One of the ones I looked at online was 600 pages. This one is 480 pages.
All right. The 600 one, maybe that was like a mass market copy or something.
Yeah. This one's a little bit bigger. The print is a little small. I think I'll be fine reading it. Chris kind of had a moment when she opened it.
Well, I was thinking I'd probably e-read it because I can change the font. And I'm also in love with that open dyslexic font right now.
Yeah.
It's totally like whipping through books.
Right on.
Or it could just be that I'm recovered from the anesthesia and I'm making up for lost time and just so excited I can read again and I can focus again.
Yeah, I have this image of you next door like gobbling up books as you go, like throwing them off to the side as you read them. Anywho, this is our giveaway, and we're going to give it away to a newsletter subscriber, and we're going to just do this right away. So someone's going to get this in the mail. Congratulations to you in advance.
Yes, we don't want to dilly-dally with that one since it is a larger book, and we would love for you to participate in the read-along. And if you don't, that's okay too.
Yes.
No pressure.
But a reminder that there's an online conversation on Goodreads about The Good House. We will put a link in the show notes. As Chris said, June 8th, 7 p.m.
Eastern time.
Email us at bookcougars@gmail.com if you would like to participate. Even if you're a Patreon, please email us and let us know. We just like to have a list because we send out an email with a Zoom invite. Do we have any other business or can we get down to business?
We can get down to it. So, Emily, what are you currently reading?
Well, I thought I knew what I was going to read on the airplane ride home, but then I was tired. And I was like, I just want to read something really entertaining and page-turny. So I opened up The Cliffs by J. Courtney Sullivan. I love J. Courtney Sullivan. This book came out last summer. I've had it on my e-reader and just never got to it. And one of our listeners did reach out and say, this is a really good ghost story, which surprised me. I didn't know that was part of the theme of this. So this is about Jane, and there is a prologue that is Jane as a teenager, and it's a pretty long prologue. But then as the novel gets started, as the chapters open, she is an archivist working at Harvard. She's working at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute. I think it's called the Schlesinger.
Schlesinger, yeah, and for women.
Yeah. And she has grown up in Maine. She had a tough childhood. Her mother was a single mom and struggled with alcoholism. And she was working on a ship, not a ship, a lobster boat. A ship sounded very, big and involved. She was on a lobster boat helping to do one of those tours, telling about the history of the area and that sort of thing. And looking up the cliffs, she could see this house that called to her. It was abandoned, and she started going there as a teenager as like a place to escape and read and have time to herself. The part of the novel I'm in now, fast forward, she's an adult. She's had some things in her life fallen apart, and someone has purchased the house and renovated it and is hiring Jane to do some research and find out about the history of this house. And I think there's going to be a ghost involved. I don't know yet. There is a child living there, and he seems to be talking to somebody. So there is a part in the book where they talk about how kids are more in touch perhaps with the spirit world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought I would just briefly read this, Chris, because it really made me think of you. And this is talking about Jane and how she went to school. And again, Jane is the main character. Jane went to Wesleyan in Connecticut for undergrad, where her eyes were open to the realities of inherited wealth, where she read George Eliot and Virginia Woolf and Shakespeare, where she developed a taste for bourbon and red wine and started drinking every night. Though not in the way her mother did, because unlike her mother, Jane knew how to stop before things got messy. Most of the time, anyway. After college, she got her PhD at Yale. She's worked as an assistant at Emily Dickinson's homestead in Amherst, Massachusetts, and later as a junior archivist at the Special Collections at Wellesley College. At 28, she was hired into her dream job at the Schlesinger Library on the History of Women in America at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute in Cambridge. Not bad.
Not bad at all. That's awesome. I love that.
So being an archivist obviously comes into play in the novel. And there is also a little theme about colonialism and the founding of this land where her town is. And the town's name is Awadapquit, which in Abenaki means where the beautiful cliffs meet the sea. Thus the name of the novel, The Cliffs, by J. Courtney Sullivan. I'm really enjoying it.
Nice. And that Schlesinger Library, that's something that's on my list. And I've thought it would be a great biblio adventure for us because they have a whole Emily Dickinson center there. And that's where her original desk is and things like that. Because the one at her house is a replica.
Sign me up. Let's go.
All right. Springtime.
Yes.
We are on the road again.
Yes.
I'm also listening to The Many Lives of Anne Frank. This is by Ruth Franklin. We've mentioned this book in past episodes because we watched a virtual event with Ruth Franklin talking about it, and she's going to be an upcoming guest as well. I'm enjoying it very much. It's a hard topic, obviously, but I'm at the point now where the family has just gone into hiding. It gives a lot of background to the family and their situation, and also to what was going on in Amsterdam, and then also the gradual restrictions put on Jewish people. So more to come on that. And definitely if you are reading this book and have any questions for Ruth Franklin, please shoot us an email and we'll be happy to ask those of her for you. Again, that's The Many Lives of Anne Frank by Ruth Franklin. I'm still reading Swan's Way by Marcel Proust, and I'm enjoying it. It's picked up for me, or I've just let go of expectations and I'm just reading it. There's 3 parts to it, and I'm towards the end of the second part. So the first part is set in Cambrai, which is where the narrator's family, the narrator is looking back at his life and talking about being a young boy in this town and where the family goes for the summers. And I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of nature, a lot of family walks, really kind of a nice look into that time period for people of that social class in that region. And then the second part is called Swan in Love. And it's this guy Swan, who is a friend of the family. Swan is in love with this woman named Odette. And Odette is kind of like, I think, a kept woman who kind of goes from man to man by her own choosing, which may have been something from the time period that women of a certain class did. I don't know that much about French history, really. And it's really not charming, that's for sure, because this guy is just like obsessive. It's all about his longing and manipulation of his feelings. And, you know, it made me think at one point, I wonder if this is what some men who love Hemingway and James Patterson think when they're reading Jane Austen. That here I am reading this about a novel written by a man about this man and his love affairs. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, ho-hum, can we just get on with it? Which I know some men have said to me about Jane Austen. Yeah. So we'll see. The last part is called Place Names, the Name. So my next episode, I shall have finished with this. And I think we'll probably have our discussion too by then.
Yeah.
Our Zoom discussion. Because again, I'm reading this with a group of people that Robin from Sacramento got together. So we have updates like on the weekends, and then we're going to have 2 Zooms to discuss it. The first discussion was really great and helped me decide to stay in it. I had to do a lot of catching up.
Yeah, it definitely seems like one that you might not have continued if you weren't doing the group think around it.
Yeah, I don't think I would have. I think I probably would have let it go.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I'm sticking with it. And I have had thoughts every now and then, like, oh, I think I might read the next volume. And then other times I'll just be happy to get this one done. And then I'll at least be able to know a little bit about In Search of Lost Time, the whole shebang.
It's like 7 volumes or something.
Yeah, I don't even know how many pages more on that. I'll have all the statistics and stuff for the next episode. How about that? But again, that's Swan's Way by Proust.
I am reading an advanced reader copy of Love is for All of Us, Poems of Tenderness and Belonging from the LGBTQ plus community and friends. And this is edited by James Cruz and Brad Peacock, who are married to each other. And James Cruz is going to be an upcoming guest with us on a BookTube video. He will not be on an episode of the podcast, but will be on BookTube. So if you haven't subscribed to our BookTube channel, we encourage you to do so. James is going to help us kick off April, National Poetry Month, even though when he and I were communicating via email, I said, every month is Poetry Month to me. But he's the one that let me know about this new collection, which is coming out on May 6th. Thank you to Story Publishing for getting us an advanced reader copy, and for James for sending us a copy as well. I really was introduced to James through these little poetry collections that we've talked about several times on the podcast. The 2 I have in my hand are The Path to Kindness, Poems of Connection and Joy, and How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope. There's a 3rd book in the collection, which Chris owns. They now sell it as a 3-pack in a really nice box set from Story Publishing. They're sending us a box set that we will offer as a giveaway as well. This collection that James and his husband edited is really lovely, and I started reading through it today. It has an introduction by James and then an epilogue by his husband. And his husband in the epilogue talks about when he joined the Air Force to escape his small town in Vermont, thinking that he would be able to then carry on his education through the GI Bill. But he came out during the time of being in the Air Force, and it was during the period of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So he talks about that in the epilogue, which is it's really touching to hear his viewpoint on that, and also that that's his history and part of why he and James decided that they wanted to put this collection together at a time when not only is the LGBTQ plus community facing a lot of challenges, but book banning is also on the rise. And I thought I would just read you one poem because it's such a good kickoff to the collection. And this is by James Cruz about his husband, Brad Peacock. Again, the 2 editors of this collection. James Cruz, Married to Amazement. The man I married sat next to me after our wedding, October light pouring in over dusty pews as he loosened his tie and sipped from a cup of apple cider, closing his eyes to savor the taste. Now I think I didn't marry him so much as his amazement for the everyday. The way he still gasps each time we see something new. Baby painted turtle plodding through a stream in the quarry, or a neon orange caterpillar inching across crisp leaves on the trail. How he kneels to film it from every angle, while I crouch beside him, in awe of his awe, learning all that I can.
Beautiful.
Oh, it's such a beautiful poem.
Yes.
So you have some time to pre-order this. Love is for All of Us. Again, it's coming out on May 6th. We will put a link in the show notes and also a link to these other collections that James has edited. Cannot wait to talk to him and read poetry together.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Chris, what did you just read?
Well, I finished The Extended Mind, The Power of Thinking Outside the Brain by Annie Murray Paul. And this book looks at current research about maximizing the brain's potential and how external forces in our body help shape that. This is broken up into different parts. It's part one is thinking with our bodies. It talks about sensations, movements, and thinking with gesture. So hands, as I'm doing this with Emily, I'm like flicking my fingers at her as I'm. Part two is thinking with our surroundings. It talks about natural spaces, built spaces, and thinking with this space of ideas. Part three is thinking with our relationships. This is thinking with experts, with peers, with groups. And some of the things that stuck in my mind about this book are evolutionary realities of our brain. Take, for example, like the open format office spaces that are so popular right now. They're not really good for the brain because we've evolved to always notice something that's moving. So our eyes will always go to something that's moving, and our ears will always be open to hearing other human voices. And so even though people think that they can work in these environments, the cognitive load that it takes on the brain actually contributes to exhaustion and a diminishment of thinking capacity. So that's really interesting. The other thing was the sterileness of the modern workplace, which some of these open formats where there's no personal stuff on a desk, where sometimes you don't even have your own desk. You have these, hotel desks or whatever they're calling them, where you just sit at whatever desk is available that, sometimes doesn't have anything on it. It's just empty and you plop down with your laptop. And she talks about how having a sense of identity, having a sense of mission by having some things around you that spark in your brain about who you are and what you're doing and why you're doing it really helps. It helps the mind work more efficiently and effectively. Those are two of the things that really stuck in my mind about this book.
It reminds me of Laura, your wife, who has this beautiful office space at home, and she has vision boards about things that she's working on. And she really says that is what helps her be creative in her work.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it really helps you focus and remind yourself and why you're doing what you're doing and what you're doing. She even did a thing, I hope she doesn't mind me talking about this, but she had been really into Trello. It's an app for a long time, which you have different boards on Trello with different tasks. And I like it too. I go back and forth with it. But she recently decided to go back to use sticky notes
more
for different
analog
categories. Yeah, definitely more analog so that it's there and she sees it. You don't think it's that challenging to just open an app and look, but it is.
Yeah. Well, and also this book is saying is to make your space in front of you be that way. And I'm highly distractible. So I think those open floor plan offices are terrible. Like if I hear anyone having a telephone conversation or something around me, I can't then do my work.
Yeah, I'm like that too, which is one reason I absolutely love my noise canceling headphones, which that was a revelation. I didn't think it would be such a big deal, but it's really helped change my life for the better. But even people who think they can concentrate, there is still a cognitive load that their mind is lifting while they're trying to do their work. I didn't read it with a ton of great detail, but I did enjoy it. This is one that I believe Cal Newport recommended in one of his books. He's the productivity researcher, writer, whose books and podcasts I enjoy. I use his podcasts to fall asleep. I don't know if I've mentioned that before.
I was going to say the writer and podcaster that you love to hate.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
So interesting. Yeah. Well, I get annoyed with all productivity stuff, but I'm always drawn to it.
Yeah.
So again, that's The Extended Mind, The Power of Thinking Outside the Brain by Annie Murphy Paul.
I read Murder Under Her Skin by Stephen Spotswood. This is the second book in the Pentecost and Parker series. Fortune Favors the Dead was the first in the series that I adored. And I picked this up and threw it into my carry-on bag because I thought it would be a fun book to read on my flight to Aspen, Colorado. Speaking of distraction, this is the first time I've had the experience where the person sitting next to me was watching videos without headphones.
Oh my God.
I've seen the author Roxane Gay complain about because she flies a lot. And I believed her, but had never experienced it. I was just gobsmacked. When he first started, I thought, well, surely sometimes you turn something on and it has audio and you didn't realize. Like, oops, he's going to turn it off, and then just proceeded to keep doing it the whole flight. I couldn't believe it. Anywho, fortunately, I always carry headphones. I don't have noise canceling, but I have an app on my phone where I can play white noise and put my headphones in. So I did that. So, Murder Under Her Skin, the book number 2.
Oh my God, what an appropriate title. Because you had Murder Under Your Skin.
Oh my God, I know.
Man.
I was boiling. Oh. It was boiling inside. But anyway, this one finds Lillian Pentecost and her sidekick, Willa Jean Parker, heading to Stoppard, Virginia from New York City. They were summoned by Big Bob Holloway, who owns the circus, Holloway's Traveling Circus, that Willa Jean worked for when we first met her in the first book in the series. He calls them in because Ruby Donner, the amazing tattooed woman, has been stabbed to death after performance at the circus. Dun, 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 dun.
I don't know what to say. I'm just looking at Emily, like thinking about tattoos and stab marks, which is not good.
It was interesting because at one point they have to perform an autopsy, and it's definitely complicated by the fact that her skin is covered in tattoos, right? Tattoos become a part of solving the murder because they notice when they're performing the autopsy that she had a tattoo removed. So they wonder if there's some thing behind that, because it just so happens that Stoppard, Virginia is also where the tattooed woman was originally from. So she's back in her hometown. So is there a reason that somebody murdered her because of her past?
That's what Louise Penny always says. Murders are usually about something that happened decades ago.
Well, Louise Penny would agree with this novel then. I enjoyed it very much. It was perfect for a flight. I will say I think I enjoyed the first one a little bit more, and I was trying to figure out why. As I said with the first one, I didn't really care about the solving of the crime. It was mostly the relationship between Pentecost and Parker that I really enjoyed, and the dialogue between them and their growing pleasure in getting to know each other. And I feel like there just wasn't as much of that in this novel. It was more about the different circus characters and her past, both Will's past and this woman Ruby's past. But I enjoyed it and will continue on with the series. Again, it was called Murder Under Her Skin, the second book in the Pentecost and Parker series by Stephen Spotswood.
I had just read a review where somebody mentioned that quite often the second book in a series is a dud.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. That they didn't give their reasons for it, but I was thinking about that because it kind of struck me, and I was trying to think about series that I've read. The first one, you think the author's probably been working on it for a long time, developing the characters and all of that. And then the second one, they're like, holy shit, I have to write a second book. Like, if they didn't just start writing the second one right away, which now I know that that's advice a lot of authors get, and authors now plan to write series. So I wonder if it's something like that, or they're just still learning how to really write an effective novel.
Yeah, that could be part of it. And which direction? Because I think part of the point of this one was to give Willa Jean a little bit more backstory. And actually, there wasn't as much Pentecost in it. And so maybe that was part of it, too, because I like her character a lot.
Yeah. And in the whole Louise Penny series, too, the Chief Inspector Gamache, I didn't think the first handful of books were all that great, but I kept with it because trusted friend told me to.
Right.
And then it took off for me, and I was like a wood chipper going through those books.
Well, and this one, the 5th book in the series just came out. I feel like I'm entering it young, but that's still the handful you're talking about. So it'll be interesting to see how many there are and how the characters develop as we go.
Very cool. Well, I read a book that you, Emily Fine, had spotted at Riverbend Books in Glastonbury when we were there shopping for the holidays a couple years ago. It's called Woman, Eating, and this is by Claire Kohda. And it's woman. Every time I was trying to like put it in somewhere, write it down, I'd always put women. So it's woman eating. And it is the story of a woman who's a vampire. She's a young woman in London who is of mixed heritage. So her dad is Japanese. Her mom was Malaysian and English. And her mom was the vampire who was turned a long time ago, possibly when the Japanese were involved with not treating the indigenous population very well. Then there's also the British and their colonial history. The man who turned her may have been a Brit. It's not resolved because the mom is bitter. She has been a vampire for a very long time. So that could stretch back to the late 1700s, actually, because I did look a little bit of history of Malaysia to kind of try and see where that could be. The mom hates herself. She has a lot of self-loathing for the demon part of herself. She has this daughter with her human Japanese husband who is an artist. He wasn't like a famous artist, a painter, but his paintings were being sold and collected. He died before Lydia was born. So the mom has this daughter. She didn't know that she could have a daughter. And the daughter gets turned into a vampire. So the mother's self-loathing is instilled in Lydia. So she's raised to hate her demon self and not really understand her human self. But she always wanted to be a human. And she struggles with it because her mom doesn't eat humans. She doesn't drink human blood. They survive on pig's blood. Because
I can't believe you read these books.
You know what, Emily? You would love this book. You would. There is some grossness to this, but this is a book about mother-daughter relationships. It's about women's relationships with food, with art, predatory behavior, and nurturing and caring for oneself, and even understanding oneself. It's a really deep book. It's a short book, and I'm so amazed it's her first novel because it's really well done. Art is a big part of it. So Lydia is an art student graduate. She's in her early 20s. She wants to strike out on her own. She's been living with her mom, the vampire, forever. Her mom loses her last tooth, and that triggers her mom's identity crisis because if she's a vampire who chooses not to take human lives, that was part of her identity. But now without teeth, she has human dentures. You know, what does she do? So I'm not going to go into great detail about the plot or anything, but I just thought this is so well done. There's so much art in it. There's Lydia's desire to have a, quote, normal life when she's entering the art world, which talk about predatory behavior, colonialism. There's so much wrapped in there and enmeshed in such a great way that doesn't seem heavy-handed. I look forward to reading her next novel. I'll definitely be on the lookout for that. The mom has a theory that the origins of vampires is basically in colonialism, that one man could never have enough, so he kept taking and taking and taking people's bodies, people's animals, land. Lydia doesn't necessarily believe that. I wanted to read a quote here. So her dad is somebody she never knew, but she has this idea about him, and she craves him. She has an internship at this art gallery, and the creepy man who runs the art gallery actually collects her father's work, and you don't really know too much about him. And Lydia watches Buffy the Vampire Slayer and people who make videos on YouTube about eating and cooking. This is what she does, and she tries to imagine what eating is like. Let me just read this. In the moments of my life When I've really resented my mom and wished my dad were alive, I've gone to the Asian supermarket in Canterbury, brought all the food I thought he might like, cooked it all up according to the instructions, dropped a raw egg in the meal, and cut some nori on top, and just smelled it, thinking that in that smell, perhaps, some essence of my dad existed, and that maybe I'd meet him somewhere in it. Now I just associate food in general with my dad, chewing, savoring, textures, bread, cheeses, noodles, pasta, vegetables, herbs, everything, and blood with my mom. I know that there is food farther back in my mom's own history too, but I struggle to comprehend it. I can't imagine her nurturing herself. So there's just so much about nurturing and motherhood and the impact on daughters, and then looking at her father in this way. Now her father's dead. She's idealizing him. But I just thought that was a beautiful passage in terms, too, of smell and what that does to your memory and missing people.
I mean, I'm hungry now, of course. But also, this is a revelation to me. I didn't know that vampires can't eat food. They can only eat blood.
Oh, my God, Emily, I have to educate you.
Yes, apparently.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, no. Well, you know what? Traditionally, no, they just can do blood.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I mean, one of the interesting things in here is Lydia at one point thinks, if I can just will myself to become human, maybe my cells will start to change. And I just thought, oh, my God, I've been there with some things. And I know that that's a big thing right now with toxic positivity, that if you just think something and you
can manifest anything.
Yeah, that you could change your body. Yeah. It's a sad book. It's so much about loneliness, which is a big theme in vampire stories, but I think it's a really big theme in contemporary stories in general, and then young people in particular, especially when you're striking out on your own for the first time. I loved it. There is one more scene I have to tell you about, though, because it's connected to our year of reading ghost stories and to Proust. Believe it or not, Swan's Way. There's a scene with the art gallery owner, Gideon is his name, and this is a stairway passage, like that stairway passage in Swan's Way that I read, where the boy narrator feels like his emotions have seeped into the wood. This is Lydia talking about being on the stairwell. On my way up, I passed the section of the stairs where Gideon had grabbed me. I don't really feel temperature changes much, but as I go past the spot where Gideon had stood, I feel a chill in my body, as if I'm walking through a ghost of that moment. So, I don't know. I had to read the ghost thing because I'm just so fascinated by how much I'm noticing that in so many different types of stories and books. Yeah. Cool. So, again, I didn't talk about this one quite as much as the Stonewall book. But I could.
It sounds very intriguing.
Yeah, Woman Eating by Claire Kohda. Check it out if you like vampire stories, if you like stories about artists. One thing I didn't mention is that Baba Yaga, she's like a Central European folk person. Plays a role in this, a puppet of her. There's puppets in here, which usually turn me off, but it's quite interesting. So I'm done gushing, and we'll talk about vampire lore when we sign off.
Yes.
And I'll let you know more about what vampires can and can't do.
Well, I finished Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout. I was so looking forward to this novel. I brought it as my go-to read when I was in Colorado. Elizabeth Strout is the author of Olive Kittredge and Lucy Barton and The Burgess Boys. And what everyone is saying about this most recent novel of hers, Tell Me Everything, is it's bringing all of these characters together in Crosby, Maine, which is where a lot of her novels have taken place in the past. So if you're familiar with Elizabeth Strout and these characters, this is a book where those characters pop up. I finish books and I'm done with them, and I don't always remember the intricate details of each of the stories. As I was reading this and the characters popped in, I remembered them, particularly Bob Burgess, because he was most recently in Lucy at Sea, or one of her most recent novels that took place during the pandemic, where Lucy and Bob reunite. They had been married and they reunite. On a sentence level, I thought this novel was great, and I really enjoyed it for about half. And then after that, I was like, this novel is too long and it's not very interesting. I hate to say it. I'm sorry to say it, because I love her writing. And what I particularly liked about it was she uses nature a lot to place us where we are in the story. So the openings of chapters might be like the turning of the leaves or the bird song or something that helps you understand that spring is arriving or that it's winter or something, which I feel like Elizabeth Strout is so just masterful. I liked the scenes where Lucy and Olive come together. So Lucy Barton and Olive Kittredge. Olive is now in her 90s and she's living in a very small apartment. Her second husband has passed away. And Lucy will come and they'll tell each other stories. And some of them are really interesting. And then 2/3 into the novel, I was like, I don't understand why we're still listening to these stories. I can't believe I'm saying this about an Elizabeth Strout novel because I love her so much. And I didn't sleep a lot when I was in Colorado because I was helping. My grandbaby Beau was 2 weeks old when I arrived, and I was trying to spell them and take care of him in the middle of the night and stuff. So I was like, are you just tired? Is that the problem here? I don't think that's what it was.
Do you think it's one of those situations where one well-respected, famous, whatever you want to say, author gets so to the point where their editors don't want to edit them that much? Do you think it just needed a better editing process?
I don't know, because I did read some reviews, and I think it was Kirkus said, if you love Elizabeth Strout and her characters, I think people who maybe remember the details of stories, you know, there are people like that, like the Gentleman Caller, who have read a book 20 years ago and say, remember that scene where so-and-so? And I'm like, no, Jim, I don't remember that. And he's like, but you read it. Like, yeah, I read it 20 years ago, a million books ago. So I think it depends on your mind. I think if that's the sort of reader you are and you enjoy seeing how she's brought them all together, that maybe you would enjoy the book for that. It's not like the writing's bad. Like I said, her writing's beautiful. I just didn't find it very interesting. Mm-hmm. I think that's what it was for me. And I think I was disappointed by that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times her books are shorter. And so maybe if it is more of just a character study of two people coming together and observing their lives, that if you're not doing it in such a long story, maybe it's more interesting. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I loved her last novel. So I didn't not like it, but I was kind of like, oh, I'm ready for this book to be over. So yeah, my last sentence that I wrote in my book journal is, I liked some of the scenes between Lucy and Olive, but it was too long and ultimately a little boring.
Yeah.
So
that's honest.
Yeah. Again, Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout.
Well, I read a book that I don't think I would have read had Ron Charles, who's a reviewer at the Washington Post, not talked about it in one of his book club emails. And that is Careless People, A Cautionary Tale of Power, Greed, and Lost Idealism by Sarah Wynn-Williams. This just came out from Flatiron Books on March 11th. March 10th was my birthday.
Happy birthday!
Thank you. I mentioned that because I got a very generous gift card to Barnes & Noble from my sister. And I was looking around for what books I wanted to get with it. I'm no longer using my Kindle to purchase books. I still read ARCs on it. I thought, you know what? I'm going to try the Nook app and I'm going to buy ebooks. That's what I'm going to do. So lo and behold, that morning I see the Ron Charles thing. And so I bought it as an ebook. So I read it on the Nook app, which was really nice. It worked well. The only thing that didn't work well is highlighting. Really hard to highlight. Like on a Kindle, you just put your finger there and drag it. It's done. With this, like you put your finger there and it highlights a word. And then you're supposed to, take the little circle and drag it. Oh. Well, no matter how many different ways, like it just really wasn't working that effectively. So that got a little frustrating. I don't know if that was just me. I tried it on my phone and on my iPad. I don't know if anybody out there reads on a Nook app. Let me know if I'm doing something wrong. I love this book, though. I'm so happy I read it. It is so well written and engaging. So Sarah Wynn-Williams is from New Zealand, and she was part of the diplomatic corps. She worked with the UN a lot on environmental issues. And when Facebook was just kind of coming up and open to the public, because initially it was just open to college students, she pretty early on saw the global potential for it and the good that it could do. So she actually pursued Facebook for quite a while to create a position for global connectivity, global policy, like how can we best do things and handle things globally. Eventually, they do hire her, and things are going really well at first, but she does see that the company is run by a lot of immature people with a lot of money. She was very idealistic about everything, and I think they were too. We're talking Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, and she doesn't name a lot of the engineers, but initially the engineers controlled everything at Facebook, and the policy people and the business people were secondary to the engineers. The engineers did what they wanted. So we're talking the people who create the apps and the bells and whistles, right? But as Facebook grows, it starts getting a bit out of control, and Mark Zuckerberg didn't care about anything. He didn't care about it growing globally necessarily. He didn't want to be engaged with heads of state or anything like that. But then suddenly he is, and as that grows, he becomes kind of callous, all of them do, to the potential harm that is happening when hate speech is not being taken down. What it is they're constantly looking, as she says, for the gray area created by a lack of regulation. And so you not only have people using Facebook, as people do, like people use it for all sorts of things, right? For good and for smearing other people and for hatred and all that kind of stuff. But when they start to get into wanting to be in China, that's when everything goes off the rails. And they start basically lying, and they start saying one thing publicly and doing another thing behind the scenes. So Michelle Goldberg reviewed this for the New York Times. She calls it a darkly hilarious, shocking tale that starts as a farce and ends as tragedy. And then the review ends with a quote from Wynn-Williams saying, "The more power they grasp, the less responsible they come. Hence the title Careless People, which comes from The Great Gatsby. People breaking things and then just leaving because they can, because they have enough money." The saddest story is what happened in Myanmar, in the country there, where there was a language barrier that Facebook did not address. They only had like 2 contracted, hired people who were working in Dublin, monitoring things, who let hate speech just flourish. And then investigations later found that the military there had a huge operation with over 700 people pretty much gaming the platform to spread false information and hatred. And it caused a genocide, basically. Like over 10,000 people were murdered. Then you get to the point where the Trump campaign, you find out Facebook actually had Facebook employees embedded in Trump's campaign that was working on Facebook. And that's just horrifying to think about. I guess Zuckerberg was in denial when people were saying that Trump won because of Facebook. But then when he started to understand, that's when a lot of things changed. And apparently he stormed out of a meeting with Obama when they were talking about that. You do see the potential for social media and all social media, right? Like, I think I was idealistic in the beginning of bringing people together and everything. And it's so sad that it's turned into what it's turned into, because I think most people are exhausted by social media at this point. Facebook doesn't want this book out there in the world for a lot of reasons, because I would love to see an investigation into some of their practices.
And they tried to put a stop to the book, but it was laughable. I don't mean her writing it, but like once it was published, they tried to sick their lawyers on the publisher and everything. And the publisher's like, sorry for your luck. It's out in the world.
I mean, I'm sure that everything has been vetted to the hills on this. Like, she quotes emails. Sheryl Sandberg does not come off well in this either. And she's left Facebook since, at this point, Facebook has stopped the author from being able to promote the book. So she can't actively promote it.
Oh, interesting.
But the publisher is free to publish it because there's nothing in there that is not vetted by lawyers.
Right.
She herself is a lawyer. It's just shocking, though, because it is just such a tech bro culture there where women are treated as basically objects. And Sheryl Sandberg's whole thing about being a woman and leaving work at 5 o'clock to be with your family is utter BS. It's pretty harsh. And there's so many people who were working for Republican administrations working now at Facebook with the policies they're trying to implement.
I have mixed feelings about it. I do tend to wear rose-colored glasses, but I mean, I know the reason Facebook was started was because Mark Zuckerberg was trying to get dates. That's actually the history of Facebook, and it really was a much different platform than it is now. And I listened to an interview with Kara Swisher, who's somebody who I really admire. And she talks about taking meetings with Zuckerberg very early on in the genesis of Facebook and saying, this has potential to go off the rails. You know, people can use this for bad. And he just didn't understand that and didn't believe it. And I believe that. I think that you can start something, and because of the power of social media and the way that information is spread now, it can be used in ways that you can't imagine. I like to think that that's the beginning of it. But then when choices could be made to have some guardrails put up, they definitely chose not to. And I didn't read this. I'm so thrilled you did, because everyone's talking about it. And I like the idea of reading it, but I probably won't. So I'm thrilled to get your review.
I mean, it's so good.
It's so well written, I've heard.
It is so well written. It's just really messed up. That's one of the problems, is this lack of regulation that's happening now. Regulations being stripped away, the guardrails, as you're saying, and hate speech being allowed to flourish. A lot of people are saying the irony of Facebook/Meta trying to stop the publication of this book when they're talking about, we're not going to moderate content anymore on Facebook because we believe in complete free speech. Yet here they are trying to nix this book.
Right, yeah.
So now on Facebook, you can say stuff like being LGBTQ is a mental illness. And that's what they were doing in Myanmar about the Buddhists attacking the Muslim population. And look what happened there. So we're on a slippery slope now on another slide that has devastating potential. It's not a happy book to read, but it is a page turner that you can't stop reading. And the chapters are pretty short. And she's a damn good writer. I'm not sure who she's working for, but she is working on legislation and guardrails around AI. This is a memoir about somebody who is really idealistic, who joins a company on the rise. They had great potential, lots of excitement, but I think lost its way when it became too big and didn't pay attention to the human cost of the technology. A classic story in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So, I mean, I believe that.
Yeah.
I had dinner one time with someone who worked for Facebook, and this was pre-pandemic, so a while ago. And his job was somehow to monitor what was happening in different countries, and people were assigned to different countries. And he said, nobody understands how incredibly vast the reach of this is and how out of control it's gotten and how our jobs are kind of impossible. It's almost like they should have just shut it down. I don't know. I just don't know. The technology is so vast and the reach so wide.
It is. It's like the scientific stories or engineering stories. Like, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? When you're looking at the cost of human lives and livelihoods. So if you are interested at all in trying to understand the role of social media in an empire as big as Facebook, definitely check out Careless People, A Cautionary Tale of Power, Greed, and Lost Idealism by Sarah Wynn-Williams. Available now.
I read The Ghostwriter by Julia Clark. This pubs on June 3rd, and it's a thriller. It is about something that took place back in 1975. 2 siblings were found dead in their home, stabbed to death. It's in Ojai, California, and it was the night of a big carnival in Ojai.
What's up with you and stabbings and
I know.
carnivals and circuses? That is an odd synchronicity.
I know. Emily reads 2 books where people are stabbed to death. It doesn't sound like very Emily, right? And there's this big carnival that takes place in Ojai. And if you're familiar with that part of California, which I am not, there is an author's note in there where she talks about taking some liberties with the layout of the town and how that carnival took place and all of that. I didn't really get caught up in that. I don't know anything about that area. But there's a remaining sibling, Vincent, the middle child, who did not die. And he grows up to be a famous writer, a la like a Stephen King type of a writer. And he has an estranged daughter named Olivia, who happens to be a ghostwriter. So she helps authors write nonfiction books, about themselves or something that takes place in history. And she is summoned home to help her father, Vincent, write a memoir. And people, particularly in the town, and some friends of his siblings who were murdered, always have thought that maybe he did it.
Oh, wow.
So the daughter is brought home. She's estranged. There's reasons that she's estranged from her father, brought home to help him write this memoir. And he just so happens to be suffering from Lewy body syndrome, which is a form of dementia, which complicates his ability to help her with information. And he has handwritten notebook upon notebook about notebook that she's going through, trying to discern what's truth and what's fiction. And when sometimes she tries to have conversations with him, sometimes he's very able to have conversations with her, and sometimes he is not and gets very upset and or thinks that she is her mother, not the daughter. It was a very interesting story, and it was told in a very interesting way. And there was a lot of that, what's real and what's fiction. And Olivia starts to delve deeper into the murders of who would have been this aunt and uncle that she never knew because they were murdered as teenagers. There is one scene in a haunted house, but an actual haunted house at the carnival. And I was like, can I count this on my ghost story bingo card? Probably not. There was a turn in the story towards the end where I was like, oh, no. But I still ultimately did really like it. I mean, Julia Clark is a good writer. I've read her other novels, and this one was compelling. It was a very compelling idea that a ghostwriter would be summoned back to write her father's memoir that has this very twisted history.
Yeah, and how interesting that the middle child could potentially kill the oldest and the youngest.
Yes.
I mean, middle child, arise.
Yeah. Middle children are also supposed to keep the peace, right?
I know.
Yeah.
But they're also neglected and not paid attention to as much.
Yeah. If you like a thriller and a page turner and a little bit, told from a couple different points of view, if you have any affinity for Ojai, I think that's how you say it. I'm not positive. You might enjoy this novel as well. Coming out June 3rd. I read one other novel. Did you read anything else?
The other thing that I read was our short story. Okay. So yeah, what's your next novel? Let's talk about that, and then we can end with our story.
Okay. I finished Tilda is Visible by Jane Tara. I had talked about that I was currently reading this on the last episode, and then we were separated because I only had about 30 pages to read in it. It was the evening before I was catching my very early flight, and I was like, you cannot drag this book along just for 30 pages. So it took 2.5 weeks for me to get back to it, and I just finished it, and I really enjoyed it. There is a dog named Buddy in the novel, Chris, so I thought of you, because Chris's dog's name is Buddy. The premise of this novel is that Tilda wakes up one morning and her pinky finger is missing. She can't see her pinky finger anymore. And slowly she starts to become invisible. She goes to her doctor, who confirms, yes, you're suffering from invisibility, which is a true disorder that is particular to women when they reach a certain age. And a lot of it has to do with perhaps they're not seeing themselves. And that is a bit of a theme of this story. Jane joins a support group for women suffering from invisibility that ends up being pretty depressing and kind of like, woe is me, and you're going to suffer the consequences of your life this way. So figure it out how you're going to live as an invisible person. And some of those scenes were kind of funny because there's like a woman who's totally invisible. So all you see is a fanny pack that she's wearing. So someone's actually sitting in that seat. And then there's a woman who's now just like a bobbing head because the rest of her has become invisible. And so you can either attend the support group as one of the things that Tilda can do, or her best friend and business partner suggests that she starts seeing this woman, Selma, who has written a book and has a lot of self-help of how you can actually turn your life around and maybe even become visible again. And Selma talks about this acronym PEARL, which stands for Program Everything and Always Repeat Loop. Program everything and always repeat loop. And what she talks about is everything you've ever experienced, ever thought, and ever felt is stored in your brain in what I call Pearl. She is the subconscious, a massive data bank of information. She's extremely literal. She doesn't analyze the information she stores. That's not her purpose. She's just a program of your past, tagging information and feeding it back to you on a constant loop, whether that information is actually helpful or not, or true or false. So TILDA goes to visit Selma and she gives her homework that over the next week, start writing down the repetitive thoughts you have in a notebook and listen to your internal dialogue, how you speak to yourself, the imagined conversations you have, and make a note of them. It's so interesting. I had a dear friend, Deb, who passed away, unfortunately, and she used to talk about how we all have these recordings in our brain, and that's what this pearl is that's referred to in this novel, and that our recordings are often not very generous, and or they can just be things that prevent us from moving forward in our life because they can become things that we really believe in about ourselves or turn into anxieties and fears that prevent us from moving forward. I enjoyed this book so much. TILDA has twin daughters who are turning 21, so there's that part of her life. She also has an ex-husband that was part of why she started to become invisible, because she believed some of the things that were unhealthy in their relationship. She ends up meeting a man who's blind. He suffers from retinitis pigmentosa, RP, which is where you lose your sight as you progress in life. In the author's note, she talks about why she wrote about that, because part of the genesis of this novel is she thought she was diagnosed with that and was going to be losing her vision, and ended up it was a false diagnosis, but it did affect her moving forward in her life in good ways. Also, the author is a meditator, and she brings meditation into this novel in some funny and poignant ways. And there is also a thread of domestic violence, which is why some women may become invisible because they lose themselves in a relationship where there is domestic violence. She also talks about that in the author's note. I really enjoyed this novel. She is an Australian author, and the novel is really taking off in the United States. I saw it at every airport bookstore I passed, and I'm so thrilled for her. This is a really fun book. I highly recommend it. Again, it's called TILDA is Visible by Jane Tara, and it just came out in February in the States.
Nice. So our ghost story, this is our third ghost story out of the Penguin book of ghost stories from Elizabeth Gaskell to Ambrose Bierce.
And we read The Haunted and the Haunters, or The House and the Brain by Edward Bulwer Lytton.
You know, he was a really famous writer in the 19th century who coined the phrase, "It was a dark and stormy night," which is mocked all the time. There's an award named after him for the worst opening line in a novel or story. But I think it was an amazing line, probably the first time it was done.
Yeah.
Because, come on, it was a dark and stormy night.
You've got my attention.
Right?
Yeah.
He also coined phrases like pursuit of the almighty dollar, the pen is mightier than the sword, dweller on the threshold, the great unwashed. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I wasn't particularly enamored by this story.
No, I didn't like it. I'm just going to not be polite. I didn't like it, and I did listen to it, and I listened to it twice. And I thought it was off to a good start at the beginning because it was about a haunted house, and do you want to come stay in a haunted house? And of course, I'm yelling from the sidelines, no, actually, no, I don't. And that part I thought was funny again, very similar to The Haunting of Hill House. Someone desires, apparently, to stay in a haunted house to see what will happen, and I can't say I've ever desired that. Even fake haunted houses that you can walk through, I don't really enjoy, so.
Yeah, I used to like haunted houses. There was a place called Old Chicago, an indoor amusement park in Illinois that I loved, and it had a really cool haunted house.
Yeah, and that's fake haunted houses. But this is like, oh, yes, please invite me to something that's haunted by creepy things and I'll see what happens overnight. Like, no, I'm not interested. And he brings a book to keep himself, entertained whilst waiting to be haunted.
Yeah, or dull reading, right?
Yeah.
Macaulay's essays, which we were talking about before we recorded that. That's something that we saw in The Haunting of Hill House when the doctor in that book reads Pamela to help him fall asleep at night, something that's kind of calming.
But I think in this, wasn't he reading it to stay awake? Was it the opposite?
I thought it was something that was a bit dry and bland, like he is. Like, I think this man, the narrator, is all about logic. He thinks there's no supernatural, and that if something happens and a ghost is discovered, it's no longer supernatural, it's part of reality. Like, this dude was so dry and so egotistical. I did not like him. No. I couldn't. Yeah. I was just like, I hope the ghost kills him.
I hope ghosts are real and I hope they eat him.
Well, there was one of this man's stories, Bulwer Lytton, supposedly influenced Bram Stoker's Dracula. I don't know if Bram just read his work or if they ran in the same circles. Edward was a friend of Dickens, so who knows? But there's a scene in there where they're describing that room and that there's no ledge. There was nothing to break the sheer descent of the wall. And that's pretty much a description of Dracula's castle, the room that Jonathan Harker is imprisoned in, So that just popped out at me. But overall, I just kind of felt like, okay, here's a quote that I underlined from the guy. He was saying he just doesn't feel fear. And his servant who was with him and who was setting up the room initially, or their rooms, is like, oh, yes, I heard feet following me and voices murmuring in my ear, but it was nothing. And so these are two very logical, rational Englishmen, right?
Yeah.
This is the narrator. Is this fear? It is not fear. I'm just like, oh, dude, come on already. So, yeah, I can't say this is one of my favorites.
No.
There's also content warning for an animal death.
Yeah. I had texted Chris. I said, I don't want to ruin this story for you if you haven't started it yet, but there is some animal stuff I don't think you're going to like.
Yeah.
I also have to say that I did laugh when there was the touch of hands to which nobody seems to belong. And I was like, oh, that's reminiscent of that part in The Haunting of Hill House that was such a formative scene for Chris when she first read it. So there was that, and there was also child's footprints again, which is something that was in, I think it was the first story, right, in this collection, the child footprints in the snow. So there are definitely some themes I feel like I'm seeing in these ghost stories, which I think is interesting, but I didn't enjoy this one.
Right. I didn't either.
Yeah.
I thought it had moments, and it was actually, let's see, I wrote this down. It was originally published in 1859. And then this, I think, story that we're reading here was 1865. It was cut down, shortened a little bit. And I thought when I read that, it could have been shortened a little bit more.
I say, like, could you have done a little more work?
Yes. But, it was interesting because he's talking about mesmerism, which was really popular in the 19th century. And then this whole thing about what connects one brain to another brain, and electricity and stuff like that, and chemicals, chemistry. It had potential, but I just didn't really like the style. So
yeah,
apologies if this is one of your favorite stories.
Well, and that's why I also think it was called The Haunted and the Haunters, or The House in the Brain.
Yeah.
Was all that mesmerism stuff.
Yeah.
But coming up next is The Cold Embrace by Mary Elizabeth Braden. I'm looking forward to that with the audiobook, because this will be the first time I get to hear the female narrator, because I didn't start with the first story.
Very cool. One of the things in this story is an American is involved and does not make a very good impression. He was suspicious and generally believed to have been a pirate. So in the next story, it looks like we have an artist who is German.
Yes.
So the nationality thing has been kind of interesting, too, because in that first story by Elizabeth Gaskell, it was set in England, but there was a German. Or did they say his nationality or just that he was foreign? He was a foreign music teacher. I don't remember now.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
So you fear the foreigner.
Yeah.
That, again, everyone, was Edward Bulwer Lytton's The Haunted and the Haunters, or The House and the Brain.
Enter haunted houses at your own risk.
Indeed.
That's my takeaway. So, Chris, did you go on any biblio adventures whilst I was away?
I did not. I'm still in recovery mode, so I can't really go out and do much. I even missed a virtual event that I had signed up for because I was just too tired. Reality. However, I did just get a message from Sean that the conversation I had with him about Fingersmith by Sarah Waters is up on his YouTube channel now. That's Sean Breeds Books. So that was a biblio adventure I had in conversation with him that is now available. We'll put a link in the show notes. Tell me about yours, because you had some exciting ones, I know.
I did. I did get out and about a little bit. And the first stop I had when I got to Carbondale and got settled in was White River Books, which is right in downtown Carbondale. It's a small little store, but really beautifully curated. They have some local artist cards, which I always love to pick up a few of those. And then local, or I should say West, maybe, in the American West themed books, which is where I found like the book, The Emerald Mile, that I purchased for Jim. They often carry books from that Outdoor Book Award. Mm-hmm. This time when I was there, I saw this cover and I had to buy this book. It's called Swim Home to the Vanished by Brendan Shea Basham. And it was shortlisted for Reading the West Book Award in debut fiction. And it caught my eye because of the cover first, I have to admit. But then when I was reading about it, it's about a small town line cook that's grieving, I think, the loss of a sibling maybe, and packs up everything and moves. And I'm always compelled by those novels where someone has a geographic restart and then lands in this small town where there happens to be a funeral taking place for somebody local. So he kind of lands someplace where the town is grieving. So I haven't started it yet. It's currently in my suitcase, which hasn't made it back to Connecticut. So I can't wait to start it when I get home. I don't usually leave books in my suitcase. I usually carry them all with me, but I just needed to lighten my load a little bit. So that was a great stop. And then the other place I went was Alpenglow Books in Glenwood Springs, which is just down the road from where my son Jacob lives. And my son owns a flour mill called Roaring Fork Mill. He kept saying, actually coyingly, like, "Hey, Mom, do you have any plans to go anywhere?" So I thought maybe they were getting sick of me, And finally I said, "Jacob, is there something you want? Do you want me to leave? Do you guys want a little space?" And he was like, "Well, actually, I just need to deliver some flour to Glenwood Springs and was wondering if you would do it for me." And I was like, "Sure." So I met outside of a bakery this man who was driving from Steamboat Springs. And it turns out, as I'm handing him these 50-pound bags of flour, I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "I run the cafe at the Steamboat Springs Public Library." And I was like, "No way." And he said, "Yeah, it's this." I said, "You mean there's like a commercial kitchen in the library?" And he said, "Yes, there's a commercial kitchen and a cafe." And he said, "The motto in Steamboat Springs is, come for the skiing and stay for the library."
That's awesome.
So I texted Chris this whole story and said, "Future biblio adventure must get to the Steamboat Springs Public Library. If any of you have been there, please tell us. I am dying to know more about it." After I dropped off the flour, I went to Alpenglow Books, which is a small but very beautifully curated bookstore right in downtown Glenwood Springs. They sell live plants, which I can't say I've ever seen at a bookstore. So it's like a bookstore and gift shop. They had jewelry and some very Colorado-specific sidelines. And there I picked up a copy of Polar Bear, What Do You Hear?, which is one of my favorite little children's books. And I picked it up as a board book, and it was the first book I read to baby Bo.
Aww.
And that book is by Bill Martin Jr. and illustrated by Eric Carle. When we went to the Eric Carle Museum, I had always thought he wrote those books. And then when we looked at the timelines of all of his books and everything, I realized he had illustrated them but not written them. classic, wonderful books. And then on my way home, when I had my 1,000,000-hour layover in Chicago because I got stuck at O'Hare, I got to go to Barbara's bookstore, which Chris has talked about in the past. What beautiful bookstores. I went to several of their locations in O'Hare because I walked the airport about 50 million times when I was there. So nice.
Yeah, it's one of the better airport bookstores, I think. And they were a chain in the Chicagoland area. And I always liked their store in Oak Park. I don't think it exists anymore. But they always had such a cool combination of popular books and academic books and backlist. And I just thought their stores were always so well curated. So it was a big deal when they opened at the airport, for sure.
They're really nice stores. And I was really surprised, pleasantly surprised, that the woman behind the counter came out from behind the counter and said, "Hey, does anyone here need any help with anything?" Which was so nice. And it was filled with people. And one woman was like, "Yes, actually, I'm looking for," and read off the book she was looking for. I saw lots of authors that we admire, like Vanessa Lilly's Blood Sisters was facing out, which I was really happy to see. And they had fun sidelines. I mean, I could have really bought a lot of books, but I controlled myself.
Yeah, it's really excellent for an airport bookstore. And if I have time, I don't have to run to a connecting flight, I'll always stop in there. And quite often the booksellers are out refreshing books or helping someone or reading behind the cash register, which is really nice to see.
Yeah, it was fun. It made the time, I could pass the time a little bit easier.
Nice.
And then when I got home, I was very tired and decided to start Long Bright River, which is a new series based on the novel by Liz Moore, who wrote God in the Woods, the real popular book this last year. Long Bright River was the novel she wrote before that. The book is so much better. I mean, I've only watched one episode in it. I think what the series is doing really well is the setting, which was very important in the book, which is in Philadelphia, and really showing a town that's being affected by the opioid crisis. I found the actress Amanda Seyfried. Okay. She's a great actress. I don't find her very believable as a cop necessarily. So I definitely so far like the book better. I will probably stick with it, but I would read the book first, which is the same name, Long Bright River. Yeah. So those were my gallivants over the last couple of weeks. I'm glad to be back in Connecticut, and spring is springing here, and maybe we'll get out and about together.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So speaking of, do you have some biblio adventures coming up on your calendar?
I do. I have, thanks to my librarian friend, I'm signed up for the All Connecticut Reads 2025 Adult Author Talk with the author Monica Wood, who is the author most recently of How to Read a Book, which I loved, and then I think The One in a Million Boy. And this is virtual on Thursday, March 27th at 2:45 Eastern Time. And there will be a recording of it. So I think they said they were going to put the recording up on the All Connecticut Reads site, which I haven't checked the site. But I will definitely put a link in the show notes if you want to register. And then moving forward, we'll let you know next episode if there is a recording that's permanent somewhere that you can access. What about you?
So this is an event. I don't think I'll be able to go because I think I have to change my work schedule that day, because I thought about you and Rachel going to this event. It's in New Haven. It is an author talk with Jonathan Losos, author of The Cat's Meow, How Cats Evolved from the Savannah to Your Sofa. and this is at the Yale Peabody Museum on March 27th at 6:30 p.m. So I was planning on going, but I don't think I'll be able to. But I think it'd be a lot of fun to listen to this, because there's so much talk about dogs evolving from wolves that it's just kind of fascinating to learn about how cats have evolved.
Yeah. One of Jacob's neighbors' dog was eaten by a mountain lion.
So sad.
I know. Yeah. They're real.
Oh, yeah.
So I wonder if he talks. I'm sure he'll talk about mountain lions.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, here, well, again, it's coyotes, which, tend to eat smaller dogs around here. But yeah.
Interesting.
It's a real thing.
Yeah. So that's an in-person event.
Yes. This is an in-person event. It's free admission. Again, at Yale Peabody Museum, Thursday, March 27th at 6:30 p.m.
And that museum just recently reopened. It is beautiful. Highly recommend you go if you're in the Yale neighborhood.
Yeah. Another thing I have coming up in the future is I am going to the Willa Cather Spring Conference this year in Red Cloud, Nebraska. Colleen is also going. She's a friend of ours who has been on the podcast actually a couple times reporting from other literary destinations for us. So I'm really excited about that because I've been planning on going for the last several years, but things always tend to come up. But this year it's a definite. That is June 4th to 7th in Red Cloud, Nebraska. If you're interested, we'll put a link in the show notes.
So fun. I'm so happy for you. And what about upcoming reads?
I have one that I just got. It's actually a physical book, Tiny Experiments, How to Live Freely in a Goal-Obsessed World. This is by Anne-Laure Leconf. She's a neuroscientist. She had worked for one of the tech companies, so she's another tech person. She used to work at Google, and now she's working on a PhD at King's College London in neuroscience. She conducts research there now. So this is about little tiny experiments that you can do, like saying, I'm going to write a blog post once a week for 6 weeks and then see how it goes. As an experiment, you're writing down what's going on as it's happening, and then at the end of the time period, you kind of evaluate it. I watched an interview with her. I just can't resist books like this, you know? I'm such a sucker for them. But I like that idea of small experiments instead of doing these grand plans, and I just always overwhelm myself with things.
I was just going to say bite size.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. So I'll definitely report back whenever I get to it. How about you?
I have Your Brain on Altruism, The Power of Connection and Community During Times of Crisis. I do believe that part of the way that people can survive difficult times is to do things for other people. Volunteering or donating. I mean, that really does work wonders with your brain. This book just came out on March 11th, so it's new, and it's from University of California Press. The author, Nicole Careless, is a health and science journalist, so I'm really curious about her perspective on this. More to come on that. And then the other one that I'm really excited about as well is Raising Hare, a memoir by Chloe Dalton. And this is literally about her raising a hare, another version of a rabbit. Yeah. The inside flap says, a moving and fascinating meditation on freedom, trust, loss, and our relationship with the natural world, explored through the story of one woman's unlikely friendship with a wild hare. I just read about this in, is it Book Page that the library gives out?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And it caught my eye, and I got in touch with the publisher and they sent us a copy. So thank you to Pantheon for that.
Yeah, that looks really good. I was looking at that and how the hare comes back and she never knows if it will. I don't know. It just sounds really tender and one of those books that will make you ponder life.
Yes. And I know a lot of people were fans of The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, and he blurbs it and says, I will be recommending this to everyone. That's high praise.
Yeah.
And then in the Out Now category, these are books that we've talked about in the past that were not published when we talked about them on the podcast. And this one I talked about months ago, and it's called Hot Air by Marcy Dermansky. This book is a lot of fun. It's a short, very quick novel. I highly recommend it.
Nice. Very cool. So, Emily,
another episode is live, and we wish you all lots of happy reading.
Thanks for listening to The Book Cougars with Chris Wallach and Emily Fine. We'll be back again with another episode in 2 weeks. Until then, come chat with us on social media, Goodreads, or email us at bookcougars@gmail.com. If you'd like to help support our podcast, please tell others about us, leave a review wherever you listen, and consider becoming a patron. Even $1 a month is a big help. Learn more about that on our website, bookcougars.com, where you'll find the show notes for this and all of our past episodes.
Thanks, everybody.
Wow!
This episode was edited by Pat Keogh Sound Design.